Well, hello and welcome to PM Express, and may I say happy 25th birthday anniversary to one and all. Why do I say that? Well, it's been 25 years since we started the Fourth Republic. And to the very, very young ones who may ask, what do you mean by Fourth Republic? Well, anytime you set up a constitution in a nation, it becomes like one republic. If something happens and you throw that constitution away and you set up a second one, that becomes a second republic. So basically, this is the fourth constitution we are using as a country, and it makes up the Fourth Republic. It's probably the longest republic, so from the last 25 years, we've been using the same constitution. And that's how come we are here. Guarantees us, freedom and justice, all your rights and everything, the rights that you have to go to school, everything, all your protection, basically, it's in that book. That book, it's literally our God on paper in this country. So whatever happens, you revert back to the Constitution, and that's your protection. Now, I want to find out if this Fourth Republic, this democracy that we are practicing, is it an act of just perfecting a wrong system? Yet, those who have read wide and studied far know that it's never happened in any nation where a budding nation, straddles its neck with all this democracy and hope to achieve anything. Some people, you have some sort of an authoritarian directional rule to say, listen, we're heading this way and that's how we're going. Rather than, look, everybody can set up your radio station, set up your TV station, set up your papers, speak, I speak, and let's hope that we reach where we are hoping to reach. Is it going to let us achieve our dream, or is it going to stall our dream? Indeed, has it slowed down our progress, or has it hastened our progress? Is this where we are supposed to be? 25 years of a republic? We can't still sweep Kaneshie Market. We can't still drive hawkers off the road. The stakes are just so high that whoever is in the realms of power, even though has been given imperial powers by this same republic, is unable to act. Because if you want to act and react again, then you let us break the rules. And that's become our culture. A culture or a people who are so addicted to freedom. And we get the freedom because if you don't give me the freedom, I will vote you out. So I ask again, 25 years of the Fourth Republic, is this as good as it gets? Or there could have been an Africanized democracy? Who knows? But when I come back, my guest in studio definitely knows. My name is Nana Ansakwa, the fourth chief of the Little Republic of Akwamodu. We sort of have some democracy there. Not like the one we're practicing nationally, but it seems to work well. When I come back, we are talking democracy and 25 years of the Fourth Republic. Don't move. Thank you very much for still watching PM Express, and we are talking 25 years of the Fourth Republic. And with me in studio is Dr. Emmanuel Akwete, Executive Director, Institute of Democratic Governance, IDEC. So basically, he lives and breathes democracy. So if I'm going to talk about democracy and 25 years of it to anybody, who better do I speak to than my own senior brother, Dr. Emmanuel Akwete. And it's definitely a new year because, Charlie, every time I call this man, he's checking in and I'm checking in and I just got on board and I'm checking. Somehow, today I got him and he was free, so I knew
not going to the airport.
So definitely I knew that we were in the new year. Doc, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Happy New Year and welcome.
Thank you. Many happy returns.
Doc, 25 years. Are we burying our head in the sun and, the likes of you are not bold enough to come up and say, listen, let's pause. It's a good start. We all understand this democracy. However, the way in which we are practicing it, it's going to slow down development. It's probably going to retard us. And, God knows where we are heading. But we just, heaven knows where we're going. But we will get there somehow.
Yes. Well, the likes of us are bold enough to say, fix the system. okay, and to put it and pursue it until the right thing is done. Okay, you know, when God in the Bible is dealing with his children, you know, and then many times he says, you are not listening to me.
Yeah.
You are not doing what I said. We go wayward, he rescues us, he points us to a direction, somewhere we divert, and so on and so forth. And he never gives up on us.
Yeah.
But the one thing we have is we have the heart, we have the mind.
Yeah.
And what do we want to do for ourselves, given our God-given rights and strengths and so on. And I think that is the story of democracy and democratic development. It is an opening for you to use your brains and hearts and find the most civil of ways, not war, not violence and so on, to fix the problem that will lift everybody up. And that is what it means in the space that you define as a democratic space, as a public space. Every citizen has a role, has a voice, you know, has a need that has to be met. And we are struggling to do that because the culture from which we came is one that says the most powerful dominate. They are not the most ethically right. They are not the best of leaders, but they have brute force. And in the process, we've seen how brute force consumed our time, 35 years of our history, and how brute force made us stop developing. We either stagnated or retrogressed in all sectors. And how brute force just deprived us for a country so giving, you know, so blessed, so endowed. And we see the mirror of ourselves, you know, the picture of what we became in those years in the mirror of Malaysia, of South Korea, of Hong Kong, and so on. So the years we've lost, the 5 years that we were doing zigzags, which is also part of growing, you know, and still praying a lot and God hearing us and repositioning us and so on. It's one that we cannot just overlook or dismiss. It's years that we went in so many directions that we could not chart the course that would transform or help us build the society and the community, the economy, and so on. That probably will move us closer to heaven on earth. You see?
Doc, you're talking about a democracy where, you know, people, you know, everybody could contest, everybody had a voice. And, you know, you look at America, and they had to amend their constitution 45, 46 times to get there. Now, all along the line, one thing they were making sure was that everybody who's going to come in this college must understand what this game is about. So there were points where, I mean, if you're not a taxpayer, you don't even come and tell us how to dissipate taxes. If you're not a property owner, if you can't read and write, if you're a woman, if you were black. I mean, they've gone through all the trenches until today, where they now believe that a great majority of the people could read and understand what's happening, and therefore now, you know, come and exercise your franchise. We pick the 46th, you know, amendment and then slap it on us, where, you know, illiteracy is really high. Somebody would take a bottle of oil and say, yep, for this bottle I'll vote for you. So I mean, that's what I say. Did we look at the context of us before adopting this holistic, let's all get involved?
I think we did. I think we did. And we shouldn't forget that, first of all, we've grown as people. You know, our numbers, I hear we're about 28 million now. Maybe the census would prove whether that is exactly that or a bit more. And if you look 60 years back, how many were we? You see, 3 million or 3 million thereabout and so on. And it's quite a rapid growth. Okay, now the more we increase our numbers, the greater the need of people, the mouths you have to feed, you know, the education you have to provide, the housing needed, the health, and so on. Everything quantitatively doubles. But as human beings, we are not just satisfied with quantitative things. We also want quality, the dignity, you know, and it's not just quality for a few, but for many. And that means that we ought to build the systems, we ought to have the ideas, we ought to organize our ways in such that our culture, our way of doing things will respond to the needs in our environment, in our community, in our society. And I think that our experiment has been how to do this effectively, because it hasn't been a very successful approach we've taken. And in that case, we've ended up with some very huge gaps. Now, what the 25 years now has done for us is that, I mean, I like the way you put it, whether we are perfecting a wrong system. Okay, I think that we are actually perfecting a system with great potential to solve our problems and redirect us. Yes, it has great potential, but it also has so many defects. So our trying to write a defective system and perfect it is what we are involved in. And it goes from phases to, you can't...
Doc, all these nations, you know, the Malaysians and all these Asian
They were not
I mean, is there one? I mean, okay, even if I take them aside, is there any country that, you know, started and said, look, let's go fully democratic and develop? Is there a country?
The democracy itself evolves, you know, evolves. You were talking about the democracy that was very elitist and limited to a few, and the debate about is it the rich and the literate who should vote, and those who don't own property should be kept out, and so on. The world has systematically moved on. That is now universal adult suffrage. You cannot stop somebody from having the right to vote or a voice.
The world built.
That's what it's systematic. But you need to respect time. Development needs time. Development needs leadership. It needs a vision. It needs a plan of how your vision and the needs of your people could be met. Okay, and the direction you want to go. And so the group of people who come together to say, we have a better idea of how we can take our society in a direction, and within the shortest possible time, we are going to build the ideal society.
So does it matter the time with which a nation starts to develop? Or it is the culture or the period with which you are developing? Do you say, well, we are now in 2017, some countries have developed 200, 300 years, and this is where they are now. So if you are going to develop, you start from here. Or do you say, no, let us also go back where we make sure education is equitable, we make sure health, we make sure roads and all these things are set before we now come back to divide ourselves and fight against each other?
But that has been part of the debates in development, you know, whether you're going to take a planned system with a collective interest, you know, determining the direction we take, or whether you're going to have the market determining, playing the forces out and being able to allocate resources, and then development follows that direction where a few will determine the direction we follow, and so on and so forth. But what you're saying, really, it gives you the two systems. However, for example, if you take China, 68 years on, they are almost the population of how many continents put together. But what they set out to do, they went through, you know, the Cultural Revolution they had, the 60s, early 70s, and it was brutal. You know, the challenges they faced, those who were criticizing the system, the zero tolerance for criticism, and the one way is right go, they came to a point and said, this is not working. If we want every Chinese to be highly educated, to be productive, we want to build industries, we want the greatest majority of Chinese to have a certain standard of life.
But they couldn't have that total freedom there. I mean, 2 billion people.
You see, the freedom is relative. There is nowhere in history that freedom is unfettered. It's not limited.
Ghana.
You know, Ghana is an interesting case. But
we even have freedom to abuse justice.
but it's also a failure of leadership. Because you see, the state and the direction, the vision and the direction is hardly determined by everyone. There are leaders who emerge, you know, whether they are prophets or they are kings, they are Davids and so on. Leaders emerge to be able to fulfill a purpose and to define a certain direction where things to go, you know. And I think we have not been very strong in that area, okay. And so we've not built institutions, we've not prioritized it.
Isn't that what brings us back to this good old democracy?
Yes.
Where we are unable to bring leaders. Not that we don't have leaders, but the system doesn't allow you to bring leaders. That's why I say we are perfecting a wrong system.
No, you know, it's not a wrong system. I wouldn't put it that way, because
for us, wrong system for us.
It's not a wrong
Maybe
system.
Good for somebody.
We're still groping. You know, we are trying to find the right way, the formula that will give us the greatest benefit, okay, or the greatest impact. Where leaders, we are no longer a people who could only depend on one person with the mind, and everything is attributed to the person. We've gone past that. We've now entered a phase of our development where a collective leadership is what we need. And unfortunately, our culture does not allow collective leadership and collective work, collective collaboration. We've chosen this great, crazy system that says that we are the group that has power, allow us to do what we want to do. We won't listen to you. We will do as much as we can or we could until we are kicked off either by the military or through the ballot box. Okay, it's our failure to find the technique, the formula, the method that makes us from different strata. Leaders will come together to solve the problems that affects everybody, because no single person or single group of people can solve all the problems of the nation. Mm-hmm. And we are failing to define that. Let me give you a concrete example.
Before you go, and I like that, you know, and I like that, because I think now you're coming back to agree that it's a wrong system that we're trying to make perfect. You know, because we've been practicing it for 20
not wrong, it's effective.
For 25
effective
years.
is not necessarily
and
wrong.
Nations have transformed within that time.
Yes, a generation. 25 to 30.
Have completely transformed. And we are here still trying to sweep Kaneshi market. We're coming straight back. Much for staying, and we are looking at 25 years of the Fourth Republic. 7th of January indeed was 25 years since we adopted this constitution, and well, in it says that, you know, everybody is free to join, form any association, so therefore you can form a party if you're 40 years and above and of sound mind and no criminal record. You know, tell the people what you have for them and they will vote for you. And God knows some of the characters that have formed parties and presented themselves for elections. Some, whether it's comedy, whether they were serious, God knows, but the Constitution allowed them. And so here we are, 25 years down the line. Nations have transformed and made it and are heading towards a different stratosphere. And we can't even clean up, you know, the streets, because if you dare move them, then you are a one-term president. And it's gone on and on and on and on. So I'm saying that the system may be good for a society that probably has more wealth, has more education, and therefore don't have too much stakes. But here, where the MP becomes, you know, almost a god, where, you know, you call the MP, oh, yesterday I got married, yesterday my mom died, you know. For a society like that, if you lumber this system on them, if you're not careful, you slow down your progress.
You know, there is something systematic about development, okay, that we ought to recognize. It is a long-term process, and it requires time. It requires thinking. It requires building a foundation and building it up incrementally, okay? And you have to move with people, okay? So you cannot, you can decide that, simplify it and think that, look, within 10 years we would achieve everything. And then you realize that, no, you're lacking certain things. Where are the people who would have those competencies to use your resources. Most of the developed countries, if you take Norway or you take Japan, the natural resources we have, I mean, it would be luxury for them to have any. But out of the hardships, they work systematically to realize the ideal society they wanted. And they build it with very tough conditions and brutalities. They've all gone through some brutal, I mean, they've somehow, Norway and Sweden colonized Norway, and it was an imperial power and all that. But they work systematically. So stability is an important factor. And the first 35 years, we didn't have stability. If you look at the most profound and rapid development of our country, economy and the social sectors, education and health, it occurred in the period from 51 to, let's say, 63, 64, thereabout, where there was stability, but not complete stability, because you know that after independence, or from 54 up to about 60, and thereafter, there was also a lot of violence, you know, the struggle against Nkrumah and the various attempts, Matimeo and all that. So we went through, but yet the greatest most rapid development occurred in that period, because there was stability, there was a certain coherence of what we wanted to achieve, but there were also disagreements, and we never found a way of resolving disagreements. And most of the time, that's part of our weakness, that as a nation, we have not yet come to the point where we decide on the best way of resolving our disagreements and then create the basis for which we can concentrate on development. You see, so disagreements are badly managed in our system. Because we disagree, I can't work with you, I can't talk to you, and your skills are not so important. If I look at your face and I don't like you, you may be the best doctor or the best, but to hell, I won't work with you. That is not the way you go if your focus is on development. Because development needs a lot of skills and competencies and effort. So there is something that the systematic step you should take first, that every system that has developed did, is that you first have to have what we call the political settlement. And the political settlement is simply about how we resolve differences, how we establish the order, the authority, and so on, and how we maintain it. So that our way of doing things, the leadership, the obedience to whatever order is given and so on, much as it will not be perfect, that is what we are not going to fight all the time. We need to say, this is the way, this is the order we establish. Then it shifts attention now to development. And we've not settled the political question. Let me give you one example. Nobody is assured today that the initiatives that our current president has taken would be sustained, built upon, expanded, and so on, if after 4 years or 8 years. We've been pendulating, you know, I come and I want to do my own thing. You wouldn't even look at what is good, that is serving the interests of your own supporters. But I am from a different party. These are our enemies. We've defeated them. Everything they did and all the people that they put in place to achieve goals and so on, we must clear them without looking at what they've achieved for the country and the nation. So your political color is more important than your competence. And then we end up putting people in places who cannot deliver what we want. And not only that, we do not even pause to ask ourselves, what is the effect of this silly behavior we are putting up? That is the human being we look, not the brain, not the competence, and not what we want to achieve in the shortest possible time, and who has the greatest talent and ability to help us achieve that. In development everywhere, various talents have to be brought together in a mastercraft where you coordinate, you harness, you work with people, and so on, because you want to go forward and you want to go diagonally up. But if you are not going to respect, we are the greatest, we've mismanaged our most precious resource, human resources. Just look at how we deal with politicians. Look at how we deal with the public services, the public servants. And we've done it in such a way that the best thing we've achieved in the 60 years of our independence is to create a system of insecurity. Everywhere there is insecurity. Stability, we celebrated stability 25 years. It's all about the fact that our democracy hasn't collapsed. But if you look carefully, it's taken a lot of effort to stabilize it.
So should we Africanize our democracy? I know you were talking about 51 to 63.
Yes.
72 to 79 was...
Turbulent, extremely turbulent. You know, the first civil service strike, you know, against the government, you know, NRC, you know, what was it, SMC and others and so on. There were civil service professionals. Citizens mobilized. We must know our history and we must know our culture. We are people who, colonialism couldn't dominate us totally. There was constant resistance at all levels until they finally, forms of organizing and mobilizing against for our freedom, for our independence, you know, then forced them out, forced the colonial powers out. So we are a people who, no one person could say, this is the way to go and you're going. But we also, when we find the way of reasoning together and accepting what is good, we establish a certain order and stability to be able to go forward. At the moment, our modern political leaders have failed to establish that understanding. So there is nothing that is given that everybody works hard to build, but we swing.
See, so that's why I keep going back
when
to
you
the
say
Africanized
what is the Africanized thing?
The Otumfuo, the Akwamuhene run a democracy. From afar, they look like authoritarians. But when you go in there,
yes,
there are checks and balances, and you are there because you obey the rules. And even though there are opposition within the government, the opposition gains when the government gains. Whereas with this system, the opposition gains when the government loses. And when the government loses, the nation loses.
No. You see, our traditional system has a lot of brains around it. If you listen to the proverbs, you see, and you listen to how they talk, and they want to build on what ancestors did that was good for community. Our modern politicians are a strange lot. There is nothing about the behavior they put up that is democracy. Democracy doesn't say you should be corrupt. Democracy doesn't say you should be reckless.
But to be fair, Doctor, if I want the opportunity to also come and rule, then I hope that you get it wrong so that I come and rule.
That is why we need to agree on what we define as the order, the values. What is it we want to achieve? And recognize that when we get the opportunity, we contribute to enlarging something, consolidating progress, enlarging it, expanding it, and so on. But we've not found the technique of building consensus in our system. Let me give you a concrete example. You know, in the 2012 elections, when President Nana Akufo-Addo spoke about free high school, senior high, or whatever you call it, initially it was criticized by the NDC, it's not feasible, it's going to cost so much money, this is not well thought through. After the adjudication, the first act of the president, or President Mahama, in addressing Parliament, was to say that progressive free high. The moment he said progressive free high, and Nana, then opposition leader, Nana Akufo, the presidential candidate who lost, also said free high, it means that the idea of access, free education, and it must be paid for at a high level, has been settled. There is no political contention over it. So the issue now has to shift to how are we delivering it to the benefit of everybody. That should have been the conversation. And that is what you would leave to civil servants, so that you find out that attention is now going to shift on where do we start it, how do we progressively expand it, how are we going to finance it, how much of the budget, what proportion of the budget should be allocated this, what time frame do we achieve this universalization? That is the questions of development, which has nothing to do with politics, because it's no more a question of I like it, you don't like it. But the two leaders said the same thing. One said, I am going to do it systematically. Others said, I want it. It has to be established immediately, and then it grows over time. So they were saying the same thing. Free high is good for Ghanaians, and every Ghanaian must get that access. Yet look at how they implemented it. As if they are really different things. They are not. It is rather how fast you want to go and what resources you commit and the prioritization. Our system still lacks how to even identify what is no more a politically contested idea for our development. Look at health insurance. The same thing. You know, first it was a bad idea, then MPP came and took the idea and then said, look, we have done it, and now sustaining it and building it. Then we saw the zigzag. They come, the place has all sorts of troubles. The generation, the demands were growing. They couldn't meet the resource needs, but also a whole lot of mismanagement and politics around it. Politics eats into everything, but countries that have developed, there is a point at which politics will start, but it will get to a point where they settle on what everybody agrees on. And that is where resources and technical attention is going to go, administrative attention to change. Transformation requires systematic work and an agreement.
Doc, if there was a junction, we've gone past it. If there was a U-turn, we've completely missed it. And we are sort of on a highway where, you know, where do we turn around? Who's going to be the first one to say, look, I'm the president, I have too much powers, I don't want to choose the IGP, I don't want to choose this, I'm going to relegate all these powers?
You know, I think we're getting there strangely. You know, just the fact that on Sunday you saw former presidents, and in the past we didn't tolerate, even in opposition when you're past, we'll want to get rid of you. Now here they come, they are talking. We are mature in our experiences. I think the pace is so slow for us. But I see something very interesting about our president today. You know, the idea that in opposition in 2016 election, his party said, the idea of electing so-called MMDCs, you know, has been on the table since 99, in 2000 election when it came up, and demands have been made and so on and so forth. And yet, if you look at NDC and MPP, they never had the courage to say that, look, this system that we are operating is not delivering what we want. We have done well in growing our economy. We now have 42 billion per annum. You know, our GDP, they say, okay, and that's a lot of.
But that's a whole different. I mean, it's growing without jobs. So that's a whole different argument.
But then you would put that up. But the fact is that all the fine bridges and roads we've built and the schools and the high schools and so on are not serving our greatest purpose, which is to reduce inequality in our society, which is to bring about the values of the Constitution, the integrated nation, the coherence, the job for all, the well-being, and so they're all there in the Constitution. Rather, we're going like this. We become one of the most unequal African countries.
Should
okay,
we?
So the question that we must ask ourselves is that there are positives in the 25 years.
Oh, definitely.
Okay, there are. And they are the foundation. To the extent that we can stabilize and consolidate the factor that has eluded us of stability is beginning to creep in. We are now moving to a point where we have to work together. But this is the revolutionary transformational idea for me. The president, one of the first things he did was to say that, well, I think DCEs, this is the last time I'm appointing you. Next time, you contest. And the contest is going to be open to other parties. It's a revolutionary idea. Because what it will do is that if he succeeds in getting it delivered, come the time that parties get involved in local government elections, the executive, the winner takes all, is gone. We have 216 districts now. If, let's say, let's put it at, it cannot be 2019, because you have to amend the Constitution, you have to change laws, you have to also educate people and build capacities and so on and so forth to get in. So let's say that the first multi-party election of local government takes place in 2022. That is 4 years after the 2019 assembly elections. And just look at how the citizens will distribute districts among MPP, NDC, PNC, CPP, PPP, and new parties that may come. And the color of people in executive government at the central level will be dominated by one party, but at the local level, you see the mosaic. Okay, and that is transformed our politics, which we've never had. Now, in the situation we've put them, they now have to begin to work together, which we don't have. Look, we don't want to work together, so as soon as you talk about, hey, let the other parties, they say, no, they will sabotage us, which is mistrust, which is exclusion. 25 years, we put foundations together, we put structures in place, We began to experiment and learn and falter and all that. But it is so important that in this period, we should stand back and look and say, oh, the Constitution says we should become integrated, a nation united in diversity. But we become very exclusionary. I can't govern with you. I have all the power. You stay out. And the way we are dealing with ourselves. So we do not have a strong united nation, except our colors and Black Star Square and Black Star, Black Stars in food brings us together. Otherwise, we're extremely divided. Okay, then we introduce a democracy, and the rights and freedoms we have are fundamental. Freedom once given or taken cannot be reversed. People like what they have. That's why they'll resist any attempt to repress it. But freedom everywhere also comes with an understanding of your responsibility towards the other. And that is why you have duties, civic duties, and you have rights. You can't have rights without duties. But we need to educate. It calls for a lot of education, civic education. It's not just literacy, that because you're literate, you're a Democrat. No. Sometimes the most autocratic people are the most educated. Okay, but we ought to know the civic culture that makes me respect your dignity, your voice, your right, and you respect mine, so that we can create that space in which we will work together to go to the next level. We haven't done this.
Let me take a break and come back to this freedom, because this system that we created has made us freedom junkies. We want our freedom and want it in totality. We want to drive on the verge. We want to build before we plan. We want to litter everywhere. We want to sell on the street. We don't want to take a teenage pregnancy. I mean, we just freedom in its totality. And so with a system like this, where you depend on these freedom junkies to keep you in power, you have to just allow them their freedom to stay in power. How do you develop? Because you're not going to develop if you don't get the human resource. And the humans are freedom drunk. We're coming back. Well, thank you very much for staying. And just before the break, I was trying to find out from Doc how the Constitution says every 4 years the leader should submit himself for another election. 4 years in governing a country can be very, very short. Now, you then depend on people to vote for you. And these people are saying, look, you want me to vote for you, let me sell on the pavement. You want me to vote for you, don't let me wear my seatbelt. You want me to vote for you, let me build on the pavement. You know, and there's a whole list of illegalities that we have to allow. You know, when you hear party people say, oh, no, don't drive them off the hawkers or leave them there. How do you need this human? The humans are, power drunk or freedom drunk. The politicians are power drunk. So you just, as a leader, you just think, well, if you're going to sell on the pavement and vote for me, well, stay there. If you don't want to go to the market and vote for me, stay there, so that I can stay in my palace.
You know, there has to be some order. First of all, 4 years is a long time in politics, especially given the enormity of the power given to the president and the legislature and the resources at their disposal. Many European countries had 3 years, post-war Europe. 3 years, government had 3 years. And within the 3 years, they transformed their communities within the 30 years, you're saying, the generational span. So it is not so short at a time, but it looks short because we are unorganized. Okay, anybody who wants to develop at a rapid rate will seek to first build his administrative system. Administration is knowledge, is ethics, values, competence, and you use the materials and ideas and you're translating them to satisfy everybody's needs. That is why you need strong administration. What have we done to our public service? What have we done to our civil services? These are the kind of people you need because of the competencies they bring and the training and all that. And they manage the resources, they grow them, and working with the private sector.
Well, let me take a quick short break. I hear we need to alter your mic a little bit, so we're coming straight back. Don't move. Okay. Thank you very much for staying. And Doc, here we're talking about how you manage the people's freedoms, because if you restrict them, you don't have your power, Doc.
Yes, no, you can restrict them. You need to restrict. No freedom is unlimited.
Except
in fact, they said that your right ends where others begin. Okay? So you cannot say, I have the freedom, so I'll trample. That's why there are laws to punish you for trampling on other people's freedoms. So we do have that. But let us look at it. I've mentioned admin. Singapore. Okay? And there's something universal, whether it's an authoritarian regime or democratic. You need a strong public service, which is the state, to be able to achieve development within the 25, 30 years you're talking about.
Yeah.
So the questions we should ask ourselves, we've made considerable progress. We have accepted certain values. Now, amongst our elites, we've accepted that stability, democratic stability is important. So we don't find our politicians running to the barracks, finding soldiers who will stage coups because they don't like who is in power. They're not doing that. In fact, they'll stand together against that. Okay, so we've achieved a certain common value that we all want to protect, which is what Sunday symbolized. But beyond that, we have to achieve a common value of building a strong bureaucracy, state bureaucracy, which is what we call the public service. Whether it's a democracy, whether it's Germany, whether it's the UK, whether it's France or Norway, or whether it's China or Singapore or Malaysia, what is standard is that transformation and accelerated development needs a public service, a state agency that is able to translate policies into concrete actions
does our
and deliver.
system take into account our context?
Yes, but every system takes account in its context. If we like stability, then we must begin to also say how we build strong administrative systems that will serve everybody. Because the ultimate goal is to lift people up, improve their living standards, grow the economy, and let's have a very strong foundation. We have savings, we have wealth. We are not always going to say we have, all the foreign exchange we have will be enough for 3 months. And when we go to 4 months, we are so happy. But can we say that the foreign exchange reserves, you will sustain us for about 5 years? And that's what we should build. You see, the common goal agreed and the common effort with competent people who could deliver it is what you need. And we don't have that. We've broken the public service because we've gone in and said, you are MPP, go out, you are NDC, stay, or your NDC will kick you and so on. But that's not it. You need the skills and competencies, not the color of the people. And you have to find a way of working with them, So we haven't done that. Then you also look at management. It looks like that's the curse of the nation. Everything we set up to do, we mismanage. We have so much resources, but we mismanage almost everything. Ghana Airways, we never succeeded. If you want to see a phenomenal failure, is Ghana Airways. I met somebody in the UK who told me that if you want to look at Africa countries with one of the finest airlines that the world stood up, they never had accidents. Their track record was excellent. The pilots were the finest, Ghana Airways. We collapsed that. And we did nothing. And we've in various attempts to set up a national airline. It's still fumbling because we don't want to do it the way we should in the national interest. Private interest and other things come in. But the Ethiopians...
because the state... because if in 4 years the guy spent so much money to come to power, and the billboards, they don't account for it, and we know they're not Father Christmas, so he needs to, pay back.
No, but you don't come to power or take state power to enrich yourself or pay your debts. Actually, we need a system. We have to look at the financing of political parties. It is at the heart of the problem we are having. Who are the financiers? It could well be criminal gangs. We don't know. Our parties are not truthful in telling us who finances them. And we don't know, how could you come to power when you're bankrupt? It means that you're going to steal the resources. So what do we do? So we have to collect, it's in the collective interest to put a system in place that checks the financing of, you have to account. In Europe, it's one of the strongest things of democracy that whoever finances you, it's a thorough investigation. Leaders have fallen, great leaders. Chancellor Kohl, Germany, left office because some campaign financing he didn't account for. In France, we've seen presidents and others Spanish. In Israel, yet in Ghana, we don't render full accounts for where we get the money. And the people who are financing our parties have hijacked our democracy and turned it into business, profit making. So the scope for dealing with the problems of our people on the ground is so limited, and we are not doing anything to control it. But the power lies within our hands. Rather than say, oh, the democracy is so bad and so on, maybe if you put the chiefs, whether it's paramount chiefs or kings and so on, to the charge of today, 27 million, develop them, respond to their development needs, you'll find out that they cannot. The dynamics are different, you know, and it cannot be used automatically.
No, I talk about chiefs,
chief.
but the structures.
Oh my goodness, I forgot. You know.
Talk about the structure.
The structure, yes, but the structure cannot respond to our needs today. Our needs are varied, they are many, they are conflicting, and so much is required to do it. But we need the values. We need the principles of governance that makes it possible for a leader to direct his people and so on. We need to bring out those traditional principles into our governance, and we are not doing that.
I know my wife is going to say you're always pushing chiefs. Now, as a chief, my vice president is the opposition leader.
Yes.
So Haruna Idrisu would have been my vice president for transparency. I mean, now that's transparency.
Those are the principles that we should imbibe. You see, because the traditional system recognized opposition, organized it, and gave it space to operate and to work with it. Why are we intolerant of it?
So that's what I'm saying, that if that's an Africanized democracy.
It's not an... Okay, that if we bring traditional principles in, that is fine, because democracy must always be shaped to fit people's culture and their values. Ours, I think it's what we have. It's not the ideal democracy, and it has nothing to do with our culture. It is just that it is business. The parties of today are not developmental in any sense.
Doc,
you know, the people controlling them are in for profit. Elections is business. Spend as much, because when you win and you come, then you impose who should be minister, who should be chief executive, which are the places that we should be, and so on. It is our responsibility within the democracy, the vote we have, will enable us to change the system in a way that we want. That is why I still believe strongly that the president's initiative to open local government to the parties is a very good thing. We must support him to do, because it's going to bring out certain domino effects. Okay, institutions are going to work, because as soon as you start serving the needs of the people on the ground, there's a limit to the stealing you do, because they'll kick you out. Our Ghanaians know the Kukroboti power. They understand it, and they're demanding that once I exercise it in your favor, respond to my needs.
Doc,
and we have to find a way of doing
that.
Let
me divert a little bit, but still within the same context, and that's the metropolis, you know, trying to clear. And, you know, you listen to the pain.
The decongestion.
The decongestion. You know, you listen to the pain. You listen to the pain.
Yes.
How is this going to happen? And we've tried it and tried it and tried it. And it all boils down to all the system. But is it possible? Can we clear the streets?
We can clear the streets, but our methods have failed. And the question we should ask is, why this persistent failure? That means our diagnosis of the problem is wrong. Okay, it's wrong. If you over a 10-year span, or 15 or 20, you've tried the congestion, and each time you fail, you don't get up and want to come and do the same thing and you say it's political will. It's not political will. Your methods are wrong. And your analysis of the problem and the antidotes are not correct. Look, the street is our market. Throughout the country, that's our development system. Go to East Legon. The street is the market. That means there's one long street with shops. We haven't redesigned and changed it to decentralize markets, and even tell people you don't need to go to a central market, because markets, what you want to buy, are over you. But where do we locate it such that people would have who want to sell and so on will find the place? The markets, the makoles and so on that were built and so on, still it's close to the street, isn't it?
Yeah.
So people who do not find spaces, the stores, or they become the hawkers. And that is where is the only place the cars move. And that's where they get their money, economic survival. So if you just say, I'm decongesting you, I'm moving you to a place where cars don't pass, there's no market there. They have to do. So how do we factor in the redesign of the market? Okay, and who are the people involved? The actors are not just the women, the hawkers, the men and women on the streets, the children, the youth who are not in school. They are also the drivers who buy. So you need a conversation that makes it possible for you to begin to see how you redesign the places where the markets will go, traffic will move and park and so on, so that you shift the market from the road. But to just physically say political will brutally remove people, is their livelihood, their citizens. They ought to have a right to trade because you can't take care of them. And why have we persistently failed? Because as a people, our thinking, development thinking, is most often very shallow. And when we know the right things to do, we don't do it. Let me give you a concrete example. You know this debate about biometric register?
Yeah.
At the time they decided to go for biometric. They knew that there was double registration, multiple voting, but they also knew the problem with minors voting and probably foreigners getting involved. But minors voting and foreigners could never be solved by biometric. Biometric would discourage, double registration and multiple voting. And yet they decided to close their eyes on minorities and minors and foreigners and so on, and to ask the question, okay, if biometric deals with double voting and could discourage it thoroughly, what about this problem? And what do we need so that we would have an integrative system that is dealing with all the problems? They ignored that. So we had a biometric register. We tried it once, over 200 million spent in the name of peace, and we had the greatest threat to peace after we've exercised this, 2013, but for Supreme Court. And then come 2014, 2015, we wanted a new biometric system. But the problems we wanted to solve were minors registering, foreigners coming, and that was not the solution. Why did we fail? And if you go through each of the solutions we preferred to our economic and social problems, they are so shallow. Sometimes we are pointing to the wrong problems. And yet there are also people thinking out the solutions, but they are not listened to. Because, the business interest comes in. I am sure that the biometric thing was so attractive, and then how to do it quickly and so on, that we forgot that there were other problems. Integrated, holistic. That is the approach we should take. And if we are failing to do that, then we say, what is political will? Political will is not force, brutally hit people, because you are not going to solve the problem. You are either going to impoverish hundreds of thousands of people who depend on, look at Kumasi and look at what is happening in Accra. What difference is it? Maybe go to other places. But can we find a system? Can the parties, political parties, who say we have better ideas of accelerating our development and implementing what Chapter 6 of the Constitution says, directive principles of state policy say. So we are coming to do it this way, and as we do it, we make sure that people's right to development and their dignity, the right-centered development, is what we are delivering to them. And within 4 years, 4 years is a long time to do a lot. Our parties are not organized to come to government to govern, and their actions are initio, rather creating insecurity and dysfunctions, in the system. So we need to ask, how can we turn this around? It doesn't make democracy bad. It only states that in our context, our democracy will be advanced if we're able to tackle the problems that are so fundamental, the underlying causes. And if we could tackle them beginning with one step or two, in 10 years we'll find that the system is quite different, well adjusted to take us further. And we haven't done that.
Dr. Emmanuel Akwete, Executive Director, Institute of Democratic Governance. That was a beautiful conversation. Hope you enjoyed it. On Thursday, we'll be back to do this all over again. Tomorrow will be Hard Truth. But Doctor, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been interesting. Thank you.